Thanks to everyone. Yeah, so I'll start by just briefly explaining the problem that we're trying to solve here, which I think everyone on here is very aware of already. But really, it's just that we know that Web 2.0 created an incredible new internet where you really can do so many things. It's created entirely new economies. It's created entirely new ways to use data. But of course, there's a number of problems with the internet as it sits today. I think we're all very aware of this. For us, we think a lot about this in terms of data and data ownership and who has control of that data, as well as many of the leaks that have gone along with it. So many problems I think we're all aware of here. So when we think about what can be enabled by blockchain technology and Web 3.0, we really think about it as a way to return data ownership back to the individual. And we think by combining privacy and blockchain technology, we can create an entirely new type of tokenized data. And we call this the ownership data economy specifically. So this is where we come in, as I've said, and I'll give a little bit of background on how we're designed. So the Oasis network is a privacy-first network. It's essentially designed with an architecture of 2 layers. There's a consensus layer, and as I mentioned, that's actually based on the Tendermint code that's used for Cosmos as well. We love working with that team. It's been really awesome to work with them. And then we also have a layer we call paratimes. And paratimes are essentially multiple runtimes. They allow you to do any sort of compute that you'd like. So we have some that are decentralized and non-private. We have some that are private. We have some that are permissioned and use privacy and confidentiality technology. It's really designed to be quite flexible based on the use case that's needed. And then throughout this whole system, the system's really designed to support TEEs and secure enclaves at every level of the network. So TEEs, for those who don't know, are trusted execution environments. And this is one aspect of confidential compute technology. So today I'll be speaking a little bit about 2 confidential paratimes that are being built and developed on the Oasis network now, and what kind of applications we're seeing. But at a high level, what you'll find in these is that compute is essentially run in a secure enclave, in many secure enclaves in those runtimes. And that actually serves as a bit of a black box for computation. Data is encrypted, you run analytics in that encrypted environment, and then results are essentially come out of that environment. As a team, we've also been investigating a number of other technologies, and we're working on projects with enterprises around the MPC space and differential privacy, and are working on how those technologies can interact and connect to the Oasis network as well. So many privacy technologies, but I'd say TEs are really at the core of what we're doing today. Ultimately, what this gives us, this design and these paratimes, is a network that's really performant. The design is quite scalable, versatile, and resilient. So right now we use the Cosmos consensus layer and, the Tendermint consensus layer. We're able to connect to that and be quite versatile in this way. And then confidentiality as well, which I mentioned. So yeah, as I mentioned, we'll talk about 2 paratimes today. One is what we call Parcel, and this is a paratime being built by the team at Oasis Labs. And this paratime essentially is built mostly for businesses who are interested in accessing and unlocking the power of data for their users and for their own businesses to enable trustless data sharing. It's actually designed to be a less blockchain-like environment. So the API interface is actually much more similar to a non-blockchain environment. We've tried to abstract some of that away, some of the complexity away, to really ensure that we're providing people with I think, an experience that's easier to onboard onto, especially for enterprises. And then we also have a more a confidential smart contract paratime that the Oasis Foundation is working on now that we believe will really be used for privacy-enabled DeFi apps as well, DEXs, lending platforms, et cetera. And that's in the works. It should come out in August. So I'll go into a little detail here on how we think about this. So for Parcel, the way we're thinking about this is we wanted to build a platform that really works for enterprises to allow and enable something we call data-backed tokens. And so if you think about this, this is in some ways sort of the next step of NFTs. We think about NFTs now as a static way to represent and own individual pieces of a good. Those are mostly static, like pieces of art or images or videos. But we really think that there's another layer of this where not only can an NFT be a representative of something, but it can also be tied to a certain amount of value or data-backed value, not just some sort of speculation or excitement. And so we call that a data-backed NFT or token. And really what happens is that token represents the data that you upload onto the network, and it's a singular representation of that data. And what's really important here is that that data needs to, it needs to exist on a blockchain, so you have some auditable record of how it's being used, that you have control of when to use it, how to use it, when to pull back access of that data. And then second, this is where, for us, we've seen secure computing and confidentiality come in. We've seen this as a really compelling use case for many, which is applying privacy technologies to this to ensure that as data is used or as you're providing access for different teams, your sensitive raw data as an individual remains protected and secure. And so that's how we use confidentiality. So to do this, we've designed essentially this tokenization engine where essentially we are able to issue data-backed tokens, and that can represent images, videos, et cetera, but it also can represent future IP or future royalties. So that, for example, as data is being accumulated or used, the value of that token can go up, essentially. The second is we can actually then attach encrypted data to that, so you can analyze that data or have it to be used, and then that's compatible across our ecosystem, so it can be shared with users as they wish. There's a little architectural design here. See what that looks like. And I'll just speak to a couple of the examples that we're already seeing being built. So the first is we're working with a company called Nebula, and what they really wanted to do, they're a private version of 23andMe. So they do genomics kits for many of their users, and they wanted to make sure that their individual users owned their genome. So the first step was actually setting this up on the Oasis network directly, and users actually have the choice to hold their data on the network, and that gives them the ability to pull it back at any time. It gives them the ability to ascribe who has access to it and when. The next step is actually tokenizing that genome data as well. What that means is that every individual at Nebula will ultimately have a token that represents that data. And as that data gets used by additional people, or as it gets used by different research entities, the value of that token will essentially go up. And so you'll see users actually being incentivized and rewarded for uploading their data to the network as well. Now, this might sound a little weird, and I think a concern we've heard is, well, do I want my genome on the blockchain? But that's also where privacy comes into play, which is by having all of this stored in a confidential way, you can ensure that the data analysis can be run on that data without actually giving someone all of the sensitive data of your genome. And in turn, you own control of that. We're also seeing this, we're working with a music company, we'll just call them Band Crowd for confidentiality reasons at this time. But essentially, we're working with a company that wants to give more ownership back to musicians. So the idea that they have is they essentially raise money by tokenizing royalties and selling tokens to their audience. So I, as a musician, I want cash now. So I can essentially sell a future aspect of my royalties. And then what will happen is the data from Spotify actually feeds into the system, and that links essentially, the Spotify data is how many plays I've had of my music. And as I get more plays and as my royalties go up, so too will this token. And I can share that token with my users. I can share it with followers of mine or investors. And so they'll have some representative value that ascribes to the future value of my network as well. So very cool to see. We've been excited to see this play out, and more to come on both of those examples. I'd say the tokenization engine is in its final stages, and you can play with around with Parcel and the Paratime now, and the tokenization engine will be out later this month. So you can go to oasislabs.com to try that out. We have documentation on all of it, and would love to have more folks playing around with it and trying it out. The other one I'll talk about is Cypher, and this is a more traditional blockchain network. It essentially enables smart contracts, confidentiality at the smart contract layer, and this is something that we're working on now. This will be a WASM-based smart contract environment using Rust. although we're working on an EVM compiler for this as well. And essentially will allow, we suspect and have heard that the biggest benefit here will be private DeFi applications. And so there's a few private DEXs in the works, as well as a lending protocol and an AMM. So excited to see those go live. Again, all of these are using TEEs at the paratime level to enable that confidentiality. Almost done. I just said this will be connected to IBC, which we're excited about. Yeah. And so many, if you guys are interested in getting involved, those are two, I think, great examples of privacy in action on the network. We're thrilled to be a part of the Cosmos ecosystem. The network, as I mentioned, will have a bridge to IBC very soon, later this year. And yeah, that's a good wrap up of some of the privacy applications in the works.